Hi, everybody. Hi, Portland. I'm Qadira Stephens, and me and my husband are each facing 19 counts of disorderly conduct, 10 years in prison, and $96,000 worth of fines for telling this story. So, if you're here, I hope you're paying attention because I could be in jail very soon for giving you this information. So, first of all, I just want to say I grew up in Portland, born and raised here, graduated from Jefferson High School. So, my husband is also a graduate of Jefferson High School. So, we've been here for a long time. We got married in 1998. That's when I had Qadira. And right now, we've been married for 25 years. We have 4 kids. And this is just the craziest thing that is happening to us right now. So, we wanted to tell this story on TikTok, but it's just too the because of the sensitive nature of the information, we just can't tell it there. So I kind of have a slideshow in front of me that I prepared for the court, and I'm going to kind of work with that and just also tell you what happened in this case, and just try to give you the information so you know what's going on. I want to say that like all the photos and medical records that I'm about to show you were actually obtained from the law firm Vangelis Kocher, and they were obtained by Scott Kocher and his assistant Jamie Telligen. And then I have some other things to show you, but all these documents are official documents. Um, the only reason the police, I think, aren't doing anything about this, well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why the police aren't doing anything about this, and we'll get into that. On the night of April 12th, 2007, Qadira went over to have an overnight with Sophie, and Sophie and Qadira had met at Maplewood Elementary. We moved to this neighborhood when Qadira was 5, and we live in the Southwest Hills, and it's a very white neighborhood. I mean, everybody around here is white and pretty much wealthy. Um, we're definitely middle class. We were kind of fish out of water here, but I will admit I did grow up in this house. The neighborhood wasn't, the neighborhood changed a lot as over time, but went kind of from the working class to the wealthy. So, me and my husband, like, we were a lot younger than most of our neighbors. I was 29 when this happened, and my husband was 28. Just to give you a little bit of context, neither one of us have a college degree or anything like that. We got married right out of high school. My husband actually had a really good job working at Nike. He had gotten some opportunities through self enhancement here in Portland, and so he was kind of able to just work his way up without a degree. So he was actually a shoe designer at Nike when this happened. He had finally made it into shoe design, and this everything that happened kind of imploded all of that. But again, that's kind of another story. I want to get back to the night of April 12th, 2007. Qadira was going to go have an overnight with Sophie. It was a difficult time in our family because my husband was having trouble at work. He was facing some discrimination at Nike, and he had complained about it, and so things were pretty tense. And then his dad died on March 20th, so we went to his dad's funeral. And actually, the night this happened, we had gotten back from the funeral just like a few days prior to this happening. And so things were kind of tough around here because my husband was having trouble at work, and then his father passed away. He was very close with his dad. And so the night that Qadira got burned, I mean, when she went over to spend the night at Sophie's, it was kind of like, we kind of, when Sophie called to ask if she wanted to stay the night, it was kind of like, okay, she can go get a break from all this, craziness over here, because it was just a lot of grief and stuff like that, that my husband was dealing with at the time. So I don't think it was a school day that day. I pretty much remember it was like an in-service day or something like that. And I just remember dropping Qadira off at the Burkholder house like around 5 o'clock that day. And I definitely remember Sophie calling like a few times because she was upset because we were late. know what time I was supposed to drop her off, but I mean, that's just a detail that I remember. So I dropped Qadira off over there, and then I went home that night, and we had like, I clearly remember this. We had like a Sears window representative here that night. Like, he was showing us window samples or whatever. That Not that we ended up buying anything, but that was just what we were doing that night. And all I can say is, like, around a little after 9, maybe 9:30 or something, Qadira's little sister Kamaya, woke up. We had put her to bed, and she woke up like screaming and crying. And she said that I needed to call Qadira. And it was just odd. Like, she woke up, she was like, "Mom, you need to call Qadira," you know. And I was like, "Qadira's fine." And at this point, I mean, it's like 9:30. I'm thinking, like, Kamaya was 4. I just trying to put her back to bed. And she just got more frantic. And so I called Qadira just to check on her, just because it was very odd behavior for Kamaya. And Amy picks up the phone, and she said, "Did you get my message?"
Hi, this is Amy. I need you guys to call me. Qadira got a burn, and she's okay, but there is a little blistering, and I think she wants to go home. In fact, I know she wants to go home. So could you just give us a call? I need to talk to you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
And I said no. And she said Qadira was burned. And I said, "Oh, do I need to come?" Because at this point, I have to be honest with you, I'm thinking like a little tiny burn, like a burn, like she means like they were baking cookies. And I'm thinking to myself, Qadira is usually pretty tough about stuff like that. I would say, like, she was the kind of kid that would like fall off her bike and kind of get back up and dust herself off or whatever. So I mean, when Amy told me to come, I mean, I went right over there. Amy did not sound like, I mean, she said that Qadira was burned, but she didn't make it sound like urgent. She did say I needed to come, but it wasn't like, she didn't prepare me for what I ended up walking into at all in that very short conversation. So I go over to the Burkholder house, and I pull up to the house, and it's like completely dark on the outside. I mean, it's just like completely dark on the outside, and I'm thinking, like, what? Because Amy just called me, and it didn't even look like anybody was home. So I went up to the door, and I'm knocking on the door, and she opens the door, and it's like I said, completely dark in their house, but I can kind of see that her face is kind of red and flushed. And at this point, I don't really know what to think. I don't see anybody else. I don't see Qadira. I don't see Todd. I walk into the house. It's dark. And she starts leading me through the living room, which is like the first room you walk into their house. And then, as you can see, and she leads me down this dark hallway. And then she leads me down into their basement. And Todd and Sophie are down there. And there's like this cartoon playing in the background. Lilo and Stitch, I remember that was on the TV. But everybody's calm. Sophie's calm. Todd is calm. But Qadira's like wrapped in a towel on the couch. And when I walked into the room, like, all of a sudden she just burst out crying. Although I could see that she had already been crying, because her face was like totally swollen. You know how it is when like you've been crying and crying. I mean, her face looked kind of like she'd been crying so much. I mean, her eyes were like practically, glued shut, that kind of thing. And, she immediately reacted when I walked in the room. I'm sure she was very relieved to see me. But she didn't get up off the couch and come to me. And I don't know if it was at that point I realized she couldn't walk. But I went to the couch, and I'm like, I pull back the towel, and I realized she's injured. So they had like I think a bag of peas sitting on her leg. And I moved the bag of peas and I'm like looking and there's no flesh on her leg. So I I don't understand why they put like that bag of peas on open flesh, but they had, you know, I don't know what was going on at this house. And then all of a sudden, like I'm hearing Amy, she's kind of like faint in the background because I'm like, oh my God, why is she naked? And all of a sudden, Todd is just like shaking this dirty tube of aloe vera at me. And he's just like, I was just going to put some aloe vera on it. And I pushed his hand away. And all I can hear is like Amy faint in the background. She's saying something about the girls were taking a bath and Qadira slipped and she burned her with the tea kettle. Like, I don't really know what is going on in this situation. All I know is that I need to get out of this house. So I just told them that I was going to take Qadira to the doctor, and I picked Qadira up and I start making my way out of the basement. Again, it's so weird because Todd and Sophie are so calm. Like, they're not even trying to follow me out of the basement or anything. Amy starts following after me. But she's just like telling me that I don't need to go to the hospital. But I'm telling her that, you know, oh no, I'm definitely going to take Qadira and get her checked out. And she follows me up to the door. And then she doesn't like follow me out to my car or anything. I take Qadira like, and I lay her on the back seat of my van. I mean, she was just wrapped in a towel, naked, and I get into the driver's seat, and then all of a sudden I'm like second guessing myself, like, do I actually need to go to the emergency room? Because it was just weird, you know. Todd and Amy, like, they were always volunteering up at the school and stuff, and it was really weird. Like, them telling me that I don't need to go to the hospital was really making me think that maybe I was overreacting, even though, you know, Qadira was totally naked and burned and couldn't walk. And I mean, so anyway, I end up driving home, and because I want to get my husband's opinion on the matter, and I get to the house, and it's like I carry Qadira in the house wrapped in this towel, naked. And I mean, when my husband sees her, he's just like, what is that? And I'm like, I don't know, Qadira got a burn. And like, he could not even respond. I think he was just instantly traumatized. So I ended up calling my mom, and I was like screaming and crying, and I was like, Mom, Qadira got a burn on her leg. And my mom is like, is there any skin on her leg? And I said, no. And she said, you need to go to the hospital. But like, my mom didn't tell me to call 911 or anything. Like, Todd and Amy didn't tell me to call 911 or anything like that. So, I mean, we didn't end up doing that. But at this point, like, I'm still not sure if this is an emergency, because it's just like, I didn't know what to do. So I didn't feel like I could like wake up any of my neighbors or anything like that. Like, I didn't want to wake up my neighbors if this wasn't an emergency. So we actually ended up calling Todd and Amy back and asking if they could come sit at the house, because our other kids were, you know, in bed, and we didn't want to leave them alone. So we end up calling them back. I mean, my mom was on her way over. She said she was going to be over in like 15 minutes, but I mean, it was just weird. So Todd shows up a few minutes later, and he's just like, he just saunters in, you know, and he's just like, I mean, if it was my kid, I would just put some aloe vera on it. And at that point, I like remember feeling pretty angry, but I didn't have any time to like deal with Todd. So I knew my mom was coming, and we didn't feel comfortable leaving him there, but I mean, that's what we did. And Renee, he rode in the back with Qadira on the way to the hospital, and I drove. And I mean, she looked bad when we left the house. I mean, she was shaky, she was pale. I mean, I was scared like she wasn't going to be okay. And I just remember getting to Providence St. Vincent's, and I remember my husband carrying her through the emergency room doors. So I'm at the hospital, and apparently I've told them what they wrote in the history, which is, friend's mom heated water in tea kettle, patient standing on edge of tub and slipped in and got burned. So nobody at the hospital thinks this is weird. I mean, Julie Andrews, I don't remember her like reacting really much in any way. And I don't even know how I actually conveyed to her that this happened. I don't know if I use those words, but that I just want to impress upon people, like, that's the only information that I really got about this incident at all, like even in the following like weeks and months and stuff like that, because Qadira couldn't tell us very much about it. But at the hospital that night, I mean, she did ask, like I said, she said, do you think this was abuse? And I said, I don't know what those people were doing. And then I said, where is my daughter? And she ended up taking me back into the back room, and this is where I really believe that I witnessed, just another crime. And I think that, walking into that basement was witnessing a crime. And then, because I mean, we still to this day don't even know how long Qadira was on that couch, naked, like unable to walk. There's a lot of discrepancies, and we'll get to that as we go through some of the paperwork. But we still to this day don't know. I mean, if I dropped her off at 5 o'clock, we don't know when she was actually burned or how much time she actually spent in the basement. But I mean, Julie Andrews takes me to the back, and Qadira's back there in a bed. They haven't even treated her. I mean, they haven't done anything. And then this male nurse came in, and I just remember that. Just the detail I remember is that, that it was Julie Andrews and a male nurse, and they gave Qadira like this huge vial of Tylenol with codeine. They just pushed it in her mouth. I just remember them just like shoving in. They didn't like take her blood pressure, take her vitals. There was no rape kit. They didn't give her any fluids. I mean, nothing. They just gave her the Tylenol with codeine, and then they wrapped up her leg, and she was wrapped from thigh to ankle. And then they just picked her up and handed her to my husband, and told us to come back if it got any worse. So, I mean, we were, like I said, discharged at 11:20, and the time from, if you look on the documents, I mean, Qadira wasn't even looked at until 10:55, and then we were discharged by 11:20. If you look at all the documents, I mean, the triage history is blank. Her vaccine history is not collected. There's no treatment plan. If you look at the documents, the first impression is a 2nd-degree burn, left leg. But then at the end of the document, she's discharged for home self-care. The burns are listed as non-extensive without, significant trauma, but then the description lists them as 2nd and 3rd-degree burns. And then it says accident due to hot liquid vapor, accident occurring at home. But then it says initial treatment is for 1st-degree burns, local treatment only. Like I said, I mean, all they did was give her the Tylenol with codeine and wrap her wound from thigh to ankle. They didn't address anything else. We didn't get asked any more questions. We just get told to go home. So we were released that night with just instructions to just put some Silvadine on it and change the bandages. But they didn't give us like any medicine or any supplies. I think we left there with a prescription for Tylenol with codeine. But I mean, again, she couldn't walk. So, and they there was like no concern for that at all. There was no concern for anything that was going on in this situation. So, as you can see in the addended report, Julie Andrews says that, friend's mom heated water in a tea kettle and accidentally spilt it on Qadira's leg. And then she goes on to say that Qadira denied any other pain or injury, and that, that parents adamantly deny any possibility of abuse. Now, none of this is true. I don't know where Julie got any of this information. She just went in on 415 and threw this into this record. And also in this record, the burn is back to just a second-degree burn. I mean, this lady is all over the place. She says it's on her right leg. Then she says it's on her left leg. So I've asked Providence to explain these records. I've asked them to remove the word accident from Qadira's records many times, and they will not. And they will not talk to me about this medical record at all. So after we got home that night, we just went to bed. I think we got home, around close to midnight. And we were very, very worried. We got up super early in the morning, and Renee called Todd and Amy's to get their homeowner's insurance because we definitely had to take Qadira back to the hospital. Nothing had improved. She still couldn't walk in the morning. The bandages were soaked through completely. And so I called down to OHSU Gabriel Park Family Clinic, and that's where we had just established care for the kids. And before then, we'd been going to the North Portland Nurse Practitioners Clinic, but I was trying to consolidate and have everything moved over here. So we actually hadn't even met the kids' new doctor yet. So they had a doctor by the name of Nancy Gordon-Zwerling down at Gabriel Park. And so I made an appointment with her. And my husband at this point was pretty worried about his job because things were really tense up there because he had complained about his supervisor. So he had to go to work that morning. And I think it's like, because her injury had been downplayed at the ER, like we were still trying to, operate as normal, I guess, as normal as we could. So my husband went to work, and I took Qadira down to OHSU to see her new doctor, presumably. Nancy Gordon-Zwerling wasn't there that day, so we actually didn't meet her that day, but Qadira was seen by a Dr. Sarah Tubingsee. And what I can tell you is we weren't there for very long, and you can see that in the records. I think the entire appointment was about 35 minutes. Sarah came into the room. She was like a young blonde lady. She came into the room. She unwrapped Qadira's wound. She kind of acted like that it wasn't that big of a deal, even though, she didn't do anything. She didn't like, oh my God, this is an emergency, or transfer us to the burn unit or anything like that. No, she just looks at the wound. And then she went out and got a couple of different colleagues to come back and look at the wound, which a couple people came in, they kind of looked at the wound, and then they went out and got like another couple people. And I even remember one lady just kind of cracked the door and looked in. Again, Qadira's just sitting on this table, like she can't walk. I was able to put like these little pajama shorts on her, but I couldn't even really put much clothes on her. She was in so much pain, and like I said, this bandage was completely soaked through. So anyway, after all these people kind of came and looked at the wound for like, I'm serious, like a couple seconds, maybe a minute or two. It wasn't very long. I think it was like 3 or 4 different doctors. Then Sarah came back in after they had left us in the room alone for like 10, 15 minutes. And she just wraps up the wound and tells me that everything's going to be fine, and very calm. And she says that, we need to go to the medical store and get bandages and Silvadene and deal with this massive wound at our house. And so that's what she told me to do. And so when I left Gabriel Park OHSU Family Clinic that day, I carried my daughter out of there by myself. They didn't even offer her a wheelchair. So, and again, I took my daughter home because I was told to go home by medical professionals. All Dr. Sarah Tubingstein was interested in doing on 413, um, when we brought her to the Gabriel Park Family Clinic, was labeling what happened to Qadira an accident. And that's what she did, and that's what's in the record. Um, in fact, OHSU used the word accident first. That's in the 413 record, and then obviously Julie Andrews went back and addended her report to reflect that this was an accident as well. Again, without any type of investigation or even telling us that that's what they were going to do. So the hospitals labeled this an accident right away, and then they just proceeded not to treat Qadira at all. So I don't know why it's okay to not treat somebody who's mortally wounded, even if you think what happened to them was an accident. But this is what both these hospitals did. And we have asked OHSU many times to remove the word accident from Qadira's medical records, and they have absolutely refused, just like Providence St. Vincent's has as well. A couple days into doing the bandage changes, I thought the wound was getting infected, so I called down to OHSU and I talked to a Dr. David Salons, and he just told me that I was doing everything fine, that we were doing everything fine, and to not bring Qadira back to the hospital. So we didn't end up taking her back until 416, where we saw a Randall Nakamuli, who was a plastic surgeon. I mean, that's who Sarah Tubingstein had referred Qadira to. And Dr. Nakamuli, I mean, if you look at his reports, like, he doesn't even realize that Qadira was burned with scalding water from a tea kettle. He thinks she's been burned by the water, by water coming out of a faucet. And it's just interesting because in his records, like, he says that, she was started on 3 times daily wound care with Zeroform. Well, Zeroform was just something that my husband had found at the medical store because the bandages kept getting stuck in Qadira's open flesh, and it was so difficult to remove and painful for her that this was just a barrier that my husband had found at the medical store. It was not anything that was prescribed. I mean, in fact, nothing that we were using was prescribed. So they didn't give us any guidance on like what to buy or anything like that. But it's just interesting because it's like Dr. Nakamuli saw us take that Zeroform off of Qadira, so he just assumed that, this was some sort of prescription. And at this appointment, I mean, he did nothing. He just unwrapped the wound, looked at it, wrapped it back up, and just told us that, we had nothing to worry about, that she probably wasn't going to be scarred or damaged at all from this. And I mean, at this point, again, Qadira couldn't even walk. And she had this massive open weepy wound. But we were told again to just take her home and to continue doing what we had been doing. It was really sad watching Qadira just sitting here at home in her bed. I would say about 2 weeks after she was burned, she did get up and walk again, but nobody like ever helped her walk. None of the doctors, I mean, if you look in her medical records, they don't even like note that she can't walk. The only record that really notes that she can't walk is the emergency record, because you can see she's carried in and carried out. But after the visit with Dr. Nakamuli, we didn't see another doctor again until the 30th, 4:30, and we saw Dr. Joel Solomon. And this was like presumably the last visit we had in regards to this burn. He pretty much just told us that everything was going to be fine, and that to just come back in like a year or two and to just put sunblock on the burn. Now, at this point, Qadira was incredibly disfigured. When he said that she was healed and that this was what her, what this burn was going to look like, I mean, I thought I was going to die, because it was just what was left after all of her skin closed up and everything, was what I just think it was just infected skin. It looked so bad. So I really felt, I just remember that appointment that day and just feeling like so sad. On 4/18, a woman named Beth Phipps showed up at our door, and she said that she was a State Farm insurance agent, and she said she needed to take pictures of Qadira's wounds. So all the pictures here are the ones that are labeled 4/18 are pictures that Beth Phipps took. I never got this woman's ID. I honestly have to say that I don't even know who we let in our house that day, but she photographed us doing a bandage change, and I just can't believe that we let that woman in our house and that we let her photograph us doing this. Qadira went back to school completely disfigured, and so that's how she finished up her second grade year. It was not good. And after Sophie told everybody in the class what had happened, I mean, people really started kind of shunning Qadira. Qadira had transferred to the Odyssey program at Hayhurst Elementary for second grade, and Sophie followed after. So that's where she was going when this happened. And so it was a very difficult social scene for her when she got back. I really honestly don't even know how she got through it. And Todd and Amy were still volunteering at the school, pretty much all the time. The fact that they had burned up Qadira did not seem to affect anybody up at the school at all. It didn't seem to bother them at all. So I didn't even feel like we could ask, that Todd and Amy not be up at the school. And we definitely were not offered any other options. On May 17th, we ended up taking Qadira back to OHSU again. She was having trouble breathing. She was having a lot of problems after she was burned, but she was really having trouble breathing. And, if you look at this medical report, she ended up seeing, Nancy Gordon-Zwirling. I think that was actually the first time we met Nancy Gordon-Zwirling, was that day. And she, again, acted like what happened to Qadira, wasn't weird. Qadira's in the office all completely disfigured, from this burn. She can't breathe. She's struggling breathing. And, Nancy, if you look in the records, she took her vitals this time, finally, and, her blood pressure is, 90 over 62, which is very, very low. She's running a slight temperature, and she's been burned just a little over a month ago, and this doctor just prescribes her albuterol and tells us she's going to be fine, and that was it. So the ending of second grade was really tough for Qadira, and on top of that, our other daughter, Kamaya, was not very healthy at this time either. She was getting a lot of upper respiratory infections. She had pneumonia a couple times that year, so she was going back and forth to the doctor a lot as well. So it was just it was not a good time in our family. When I look at these medical records from OHSU, I feel so angry. I don't know how Nancy Gordon Zwirling could have sat there and smiled in my face and pretended that my child was okay when in fact she was dying. I mean, it's a miracle that Qadira is alive. After the visit with Beth Phipps, we had decided to get an attorney. Beth had told us at that visit that the insurance company would probably offer some money and that the money would need to go into a trust. So initially, we hired Stephen P. Reidlinger from Suzak and Powell, and he was only Qadira's attorney for like a couple weeks. I don't even think we had signed papers or anything like that. Um, what ended up happening was this guy named Scott Kocher called me up on the phone. We still don't really know how Scott got our information, whether we contacted him or he contacted us. It's very odd. But um, Scott ended up taking the case. He was with the law firm Vangelisti Kocher, and he called me up and he said that he was a special burn attorney and that burns needed to be handled in a special way, and that he had handled cases like this before. And he said that he should be Qadira's attorney, and he was pretty insistent on it. We didn't hire him right away because we had already had Steve in place. So I told him that, we would think about it, and he actually came to our house and like did a meet and greet with me and my husband, and you know explaining pretty much why he should have this case. And we did end up hiring Scott. He seemed like he was more experienced than Steve would be, and we just were going off of his advice essentially. Scott took the case on at pro bono. I mean, which was what Steve was also offering to do, but Scott, he was with it seemed like a better law firm, and he knew what he was doing. So we ended up, you know, signing a contract with him, and what we, really believed is that we were signing a contract for him to be, Qadira's attorney. And so we were really relieved to have Scott in place. He said that he was going to get the case, thoroughly investigated. He presented well. He went to Harvard. We met his partner, Richard Vangelisti, who was also supposed to be, helping out with the case. And so we just pretty much put all our trust in Scott. And over the next few months, like over the summer and stuff, he had, Renee, well, not just over the summer, but over the next few months as this thing unfolded, he had Renee bringing Qadira like every month up to his office, and he would photograph her changing burn, because the burn was burn was constantly changing, like the way the skin looked. And that's what he was doing to presumably document her injury, although it turned out later that Scott really was never working for Qadira. It was a really tough summer because things with my husband's job came to a head at Nike, and pretty much they wanted him to drop his discrimination complaint, but he wanted to be moved away from the guy who had been harassing him, and Nike refused. So my husband refused to drop the complaint because he was hoping it would be resolved with him being moved away, from the person who was harassing him. And he was moved away because he was fired. So in August of 2007, my husband lost his job, and he had been working at Nike for 8 years. And this was, very devastating. He had been in the footwear industry for 15 years because he had started at Adidas and then moved over to Nike. And after he got fired, what we discovered is he couldn't find another job. He ended up getting blacklisted. And um, so things were already really difficult um, because of Qadira being burned. But when my husband got fired, it got way worse because, he couldn't find another job and we had a ton of responsibilities. I mean, a house, 4 kids. Um, I was only working on the weekends at the time. So, I mean, when he got fired, I mean, we were looking at, having no income. And it was a very, very tense time. When the school year started back up for the third grade, Qadira was still going to the Odyssey program. And, I mean, Todd and Amy were still volunteering up there all the time. Things were so weird because my husband had been fired. He wasn't going to work anymore. He couldn't find a job. And Qadira right away was having a really tough time. I mean, the Odyssey program is kind of an advanced program, and she just couldn't keep up. And at the same time, her little sister Kamaya was having a lot of just little illnesses, respiratory issues. She had pneumonia. And then also Qadira wasn't doing well. She was having a lot of just fevers, rashes, and she just generally was not feeling good. And of course, there was the disfigurement. So she was also turning, pretty much into a social leper. I mean, she was kind of being shunned at school. And then in October, Kamaya almost died from Kawasaki syndrome. She got really, 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 really sick. And at that point, my husband had to take out his retirement so we could COBRA our health insurance so we could pay Kamaya's medical bills. And it was a little after Kamaya got out of the hospital that Scott came to us and said that we had to file this lawsuit because Todd and Amy were being difficult. I don't really know. He didn't really explain what that meant, but he said that, we had to file a lawsuit if we wanted to get anything figured out for Qadira, if we wanted to resolve this issue. And he said that in order to file a lawsuit, I had to be guardian ad litem. Now, I'm just a high school graduate. I had no qualifications to be guardian ad litem, but I didn't even know what a guardian ad litem was. I mean, he said I had to be guardian ad litem. And so I just agreed to be guardian ad litem. And he had me appointed to that position, even though I found out later that he, had a guardian ad litem on staff. But he put me in that role so he could file the lawsuit against Amy. I mean, we always believed that we hired Scott to be Qadira's attorney, but actually, if you look at the paperwork, I was the plaintiff in the lawsuit that he ended up filing, and he only filed the lawsuit against Amy. So that's just another interesting fact of this entire case. He never showed me the lawsuit or anything like that. He never explained to me how much money that he was going to be asking for. He really didn't tell me much, and I didn't know even what to ask. I mean, I was just going along. We were just going along with whatever Scott said we should do. But he ended up filing this lawsuit, and essentially the lawsuit alleged that, Amy, failed to take reasonable care to avoid pouring heated water on Qadira. And it was a claim for negligence. Now, at this point, Scott never explained to us that the hospitals had labeled this an accident. We had absolutely no clue about that. So, I mean, clearly, if the hospital has labeled it an accident, then why are we suddenly filing a lawsuit claiming negligence? I mean, it totally looks weird. But again, this is just information that he kept from us. I mean, Scott never even explained to me that I was the plaintiff in the lawsuit. So, I mean, this is what I'm saying. We were like, we had no information essentially. So it was just a really rough holiday season, and then New Year beginning 2008. Uh, Filing the lawsuit was after Scott filed the lawsuit. I mean, it just things were so stressful, and then my husband was also waiting for word, basically from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That's where he had filed the complaint against Nike, and he was still hoping they would, investigate his case. And then he was hoping maybe, if they found in his favor, he would get his job back and possibly get his career back, which would have been nice. But unfortunately, they just ended up throwing out his complaint in January. And Qadira also, at this time, was not doing good. And Kamaya was really having a very slow recovery from the Kawasaki. She had come home from the hospital weighing 22 pounds. So it was just very touch and go over here. So in January, I mean, Qadira also started exhibiting signs of Kawasaki's. I mean, she was having all kinds of weird symptoms, and I took her back to OHSU. And she ended up seeing a Dr. Dara Perkins on January 22nd. And Dara essentially told me that Qadira was fine, but as you can see in the record, Qadira was not fine. Her blood pressure was registering at 86/58. She hadn't gained any weight. She was still 59 pounds. She hadn't gained any weight from the time she'd been burned. And then there was a whole host of other symptoms she was having. Dara just told me she was fine though, and sent me home. Just told me, Tylenol, fluids, rest, that type of thing. And she did, though, order a full metabolic plant panel to be run on Qadira, just to, I guess, rule out the Kawasaki's, which I never did get the results of those tests. But I did take Qadira back 3 days later, and she saw Dr. Ariel Schmitz. As in Ariel Schmidt's record, you can see that she did not bother to take Qadira's vitals, 3 days after her blood pressure had been recorded at 86/58, which is basically, I mean, she's dead at that point, right? So, but Ariel Schmitz, again, just tells me she's fine, and fluids and rest. She tells me she doesn't have Kawasaki's, and that was the extent of those appointments. Now, we did find blood tests in Scott's files after we got them. This was all after the trial and everything. But those blood tests revealed that, Qadira was in severe internal distress, and OHSU didn't tell us anything. They did not give us that information. So Qadira was just really struggling, and, we would take her back and forth to the doctor, and they would just keep telling us she was fine. And it went on like this for a very, very, very long time. It's still kind of going on like that right now. So the blood tests are the last of the medical records that Scott had in his files. So Scott was fully aware that Qadira was in internal distress, and that, again, is not information that he divulged to us or that any of the doctors divulged to us. So we had no idea that this was going on. But Scott did come to us around that time, well, just a little after these blood tests were taken in February of 2008, and he said that we needed to take depositions in the case. He wanted to take my deposition and Qadira's deposition, and then I guess Todd, Sophie, and Amy were going to have their depositions taken. So that's what happened. There is a lot of problem with problems with the deposition testimony in this case. I mean, Amy, Todd, and Sophie all described a crime, as well as Qadira. So some of the most important parts of their deposition I kind of just, put onto these slides, but I mean, we can make those, the depositions will be available to the public for people to read. But they were very, very shocking, and all of the information that Scott collected in these depositions, he did not share with me and my husband. So we had no idea. Scott, well, despite us voicing our concerns about Qadira having, been bathed at that house, that she was in that situation at all, because this wasn't a family where we would have ever even expected for them to be giving her a bath. I mean, we didn't know these people well enough for that to even have been going on at all. Sophie was just a classmate from school, and sure, her and Qadira had some play dates back and forth, but we never expected that she would be taking a bath over there. So there is a lot of concerning testimony that came out in the depositions, and then more concerning testimony, eventually came out at trial in front of us. My mom's statement was also taken by Rudy Lockenmeyer's assistant, Betsy Fernley, and she had a lot of interesting things to say about her encounter with Todd the night she came over to sit with the kids the night Qadira was burned. So Todd's behavior, to her was not okay, and that is detailed in the statement that we have here. The only time Qadira was ever questioned about what happened to her at the McQuiston Burkholder house was in her deposition. Her deposition was collected by Rudy Lockenmeyer. He's just an attorney. He was a hostile attorney. He wasn't even really nice to her at all. Asked a lot of inappropriate questions. And I think the most important thing to note is that Qadira was in severe internal distress when this deposition was taken. She also was interviewed in front of Amy. So they brought Amy into the room. I was terrified when Amy walked into that room, but Amy, and then there was another woman there named Susan O'Leary. I don't even know who this woman was or why she was in the room, but Scott said that, this was all fine. So while Qadira was being questioned by Rudy, Amy was sitting at the other end of the table glaring at her. And I mean, I was an adult at the time and I felt scared. So I can't even imagine, what this was like for my 9-year-old daughter. In Qadira's deposition testimony, she says that she was standing on the lip of the tub and that Todd came barging into the bathroom and she was scared and trying to hide. So she slipped off the edge of the tub into the stream of boiling water. Her statements have been used by law enforcement and just people in the neighborhood, basically to say that this was somehow an accident. First of all, I mean, Amy had a lethal weapon in that bathroom. I mean, a tea kettle full of scalding water, and the entire situation was completely inappropriate. But also, I just think that the injury looks very, very strange. To me, it looks like she was held down or something, because the burn is just like so localized into one spot. And over the years, we have tried to reenact Qadira's version of events, standing on the edge of our own tub and, trying to figure out how this could have happened. And we've just never been able to do it. It seems like the water would have, run down more of her leg, or she would have been more bruised up on her backside, or she would have broken something. I don't know. The space in the bathtub is so small. So Anyway, and even in Scott Kotcher's notes, he notes that the burn looks odd for a fall in water. So after the depositions, my husband ended up getting an attorney by the name of Mitra Shari to help him with his Nike case. When the EEOC gives you a dismissal, you only have 90 days to pursue a claim. So essentially, you have 90 days to sue your employer. The EEOC had given him an indeterminate finding, and he did talk to several attorneys. We didn't have any money to hire an attorney, but Mitra took the case pro bono, so we were pretty hopeful there. But 10 days before the lawsuit needed to be filed, Mitra called up my husband and said that she decided she wasn't going to file the case. And she didn't really give him an explanation. She just sent him back all his materials. And at that point, my husband didn't have any options for employment, so we decided to file a pro se claim to see if maybe we could resolve the situation so he could actually, get his job back, because that's what we really needed at the time. It's interesting because after he filed the pro se lawsuit, suddenly Scott called him up and said that his deposition was also going to be needed in Qadira's case. And probably the most interesting thing about my husband's deposition is that it is the longest deposition that was taken in Qadira's case. It's really quite thick, whereas Todd and Amy's are actually the thinnest depositions that were taken in the case. So the two perpetrators were hardly talked to at all. But my husband and I, actually, we were grilled. But my husband was really grilled the most. This case did not go to trial until August 2008. So after the depositions, Scott just continued, having Renee bring Qadira back and forth to his office to get her injury photographed every single month. I have to say that, this was just more abuse. And then the case eventually did go to mediation. We actually met with a mediator named John Barker. And that was just a very strange experience. When we went to the mediation, Scott allowed Rudy to photograph Qadira's legs. He also made her in front of a few different, it wasn't just John Barker, it was like John Barker, and I just remember there being a couple other men there, but Scott made Qadira lift her pant leg to show them her injury. So that was really weird. We're talking about a 9-year-old child, but Scott, again, the entire time is telling me that these are the things we have to do. The mediation lasted pretty much all day. John Barker just kept coming in the room and offering, he offered $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. At one point he said they might go up to $25,000, but honestly, me and my husband had absolutely no ability to decide any of that. And, we still didn't know during the mediation what had even gone on. So I think we were still waiting for an actual explanation. Scott never really explained anything to us. So basically Scott tells us that we should just walk out of the mediation, and that the offers were too low, and that, we would do better at trial. We expressed to him over and over and over that we did not want to take Qadira to trial. Qadira was not doing well. I don't know. I don't know how many times I can say that. She was pretty sickly after all of this, and also just having, I mean, emotionally, she was really struggling. And like I said, the school year was going horribly. I mean, she really didn't have friends. She really was, like I said, struggling with her studies. And we were getting to the point where we were just going to take her out of the Odyssey program. Um, that's how we were feeling. It was also just very odd to have Todd and Amy up at the school all the time. So, but we were also kind of waiting for this situation to resolve. Again, it's like the school, the teachers, everybody, they were just acting like this was fine, and nobody was giving us any help or guidance or options along the way. By the time August rolled around and we were getting ready for trial, because the trial happened on August 11th and 12th, our family was pretty much in dire straits. Renee, again, was not able to get another job in his industry. So by then, we had basically run out of resources. We were on welfare. We had just gotten on welfare in the summer. We were looking at losing our home. So it was a really hard time when we went to trial. And we told Scott that we didn't want to bring Qadira to trial. And in fact, we did not bring Qadira to trial. So, and Scott, he acted like that was perfectly fine. So he acted like the trial would be fine if we didn't bring Qadira to trial. So, but obviously, I mean, the trial turned out not to be fine at all. Although I will say, I'm glad we didn't bring Qadira to the trial, because what happened at the trial was like something out of a horror movie. Amy testified to abusing Qadira. She testified to burning Qadira. She said that Todd had boiled the water in the tea kettle and brought it down to her, and that she burned Qadira. She said that she knew the water was hot enough to scald. She said that they were playing Naked Little House on the Prairie. I mean, this is what they both said at the trial, that they were playing Naked Little House on the Prairie. They said they played this game with their daughter all the time. And I mean, while all this was going on, me and my husband were sitting in the courtroom trying to understand what was happening. But Scott was acting like everything was fine. The judge, this case was heard in front of Judge Michael McShane. He's a federal judge now. He acted like everything was fine, but these people, what they described in that courtroom was definitely a crime. So my husband couldn't be in the courtroom the entire time. I think because he was testifying, they only brought him in to testify. I guess because I was guardian ad litem, I got to be in the courtroom the entire time. But it was definitely hard for me to convey to my husband what I was seeing and hearing in there. And Scott, the entire time, was telling me that all of this was fine. There were periods during this trial where I was literally feeling like I was going to have a heart attack, trying to take in this information. When Todd took the stand, I mean, he talked about that Qadira had bathed over at their house before. Now, even in Qadira's deposition testimony, she definitely said she had never bathed at their house before, and to this day, she has no recollection of that. He said a lot of other concerning things that just really literally did not make sense. I mean, they were sitting up there like I said, saying they were playing Naked Little House on the Prairie. So the testimony and that I heard, what I heard described was definitely a crime. And, that was the same for when Sophie took the stand as well. I was trying to make sense of it, you know, trying to understand it, trying to talk to Scott about it, but Scott was really downplaying what they were saying and pretty much telling me, that I shouldn't react, that, I shouldn't be upset. But during the trial, I think I was beginning to realize that, I had no idea what had happened to Qadira on the night of April 12th, 2007. And, neither did Scott. The trial ended up coming to a really shocking ending. I mean, Scott, the entire time before we went to trial, he kept trying to make it seem like, he made it seem like that the trial wasn't even going to happen. Like, he told us that, before the trial even started, Rudy was probably going to lean over, with a better number, and then we would just end it there. But that's not what ended up happening. And pretty much, I mean, I felt like I was going to die that day. Like, the jury came back in. It was an all-white jury, and they only deliberated for 10 minutes. But I could hear them, me and my husband could hear them laughing really loudly from the jury room, presumably as they were looking at pictures of our burned up daughter. So, I mean, it was so loud. And when they filed back into the courtroom, I mean, we just knew that it was going to be bad. And, they found Amy not negligent at all. I mean, Qadira was awarded nothing, zero, not even, reimbursement for the bandages. I mean, nothing. And actually, we were charged their court costs and attorney's fees. So it was like we were in trouble because this lawsuit got filed in the first place. And Scott's attitude at that point was just like, you win some, you lose some. But I'll never forget when this ended, when the trial ended, because I remember just when we left the courtroom, and I remember my husband was just really upset, and I remember their attorney, Rudy Lockenmeyer, I remember he said to us, do you know what you did to their family? He was angry at us. Everybody was like angry at us. And then I also remember Rudy saying to my husband, well, maybe they could work something out about the court's costs and attorney's fees, because my husband was just a welder, which my husband had gotten a job down at Gunderson making like $15-16 an hour as a welder. It didn't last, but that's what he was doing at the time. I mean, he was trying to find some kind of work after being fired from Nike. But yeah, at this point, we were trying to figure out like what the hell just happened, and Scott just pretty much said that he wasn't going to do anything more for Qadira. And I remember he told me, he said we needed to button it down and walk away. So that was his attitude. But we told Scott that we were going to call the police, and we did call the police, because what Todd and Amy and Sophia described was definitely a crime, and the police did not receive us well at all. So I just remember that an officer, I believe his name was Officer Westerberry, came to our house when we called this in to report it, and he was screaming at my husband. He was red-faced, he was sweaty. I mean, this was your typical red-faced, sweaty, white cop. And he's screaming at my husband saying that we cannot file a police report. And it was a pretty heated discussion. And he wouldn't take a report at our house. So the next day, my husband got up or it was like a couple days later, he took Qadira down to the police station where she filed a report, where they were able to file a report. But from there, the police didn't investigate. And actually, that police report is one of the reports we've been trying to get access to. We've never been able to see the report that Qadira filed when she was 9 years old. First, the police said that we couldn't have access to the report because there was no documents responsive to our request. So we took that to mean that they didn't even take a report. But then they came back and said that we couldn't have access to the report because it contains reports of child abuse. And that is still the DA's position to this day. So that is the excuse that they are still using as to why we cannot see the original police report that Qadira filed. So on August 23rd, though, we did get a visit from CPS at our house, and a lady by the name of Ferdusi Chowdhury came here and she interviewed Qadira. I had no idea at the time that CPS was actually investigating us, but if you take a close look at the report, that is in fact what they did. The report is really super suspicious, and I've asked, believe you me, I've asked DHS to reopen this investigation and change this report, but they will not. They also won't give me an unredacted version of the report, but I was the main suspect in the investigation. Not that they did anything. I mean, they came here, they talked to Qadira, and then apparently the worker went over to Todd and Amy's house and was shooed away by Todd, and then their attorney called and said that he said something about that we were angry and we were doing everything we can to blank, 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 blank. I mean, if you look at these reports, it's just absolutely egregious. Another thing that you can see from the DHS report, and this is the only report that exists as far as we know, is that there was no law enforcement investigation. So the entire state investigation was the worker coming over here and talking to Qadira. And that was it. That's all she did. And CPS never came back to our house ever again. 2008 was the year that Carly's Law was passed. Carly's Law is named for Carly Sheehan. She was a little girl who was beaten to death by her mother's boyfriend, and signs of abuse were missed by people who should have caught them. So Carly's Law was signed in. It was passed by Sarah Gessler, I believe, or that's who helped write the legislation or whatever. But as you can see, Carly's Law in Qadira's case wasn't followed at all. The first injury that you're supposed to be suspicious of is a burn. I mean, it's literally number one on the list. And Carly's Law makes it so any child that, if there is suspected abuse, they're supposed to have a medical assessment. They're supposed to get a dedicated medical team. There's a lot of protocols that are supposed to be followed with a Carly's Law investigation, and that absolutely did not happen in this case. We were trying to understand how Scott had lost this case, like what had went back to the jury, what was the jury looking at, and we went and viewed the court file. That was something that we were able to do. And inside the court file, we were just shocked to find that all the exhibits, and all of the exhibits that Todd and Amy's attorney used were essentially from Portland Public Schools. So information about the Odyssey program, pictures and video of Qadira at school, stuff like that. And we were absolutely horrified. We went to Hayhurst Elementary and we went to the Portland Public Schools administration, and we asked them, to explain, this, why, if this was okay, why this was okay. And pretty much they just said that, they couldn't comment, because we had lost the case essentially, and that Todd and Amy were going to still be allowed to volunteer in the Odyssey program. and that if we didn't want Qadira to be around them, then she could leave the Odyssey program. And so that's what we ended up doing. Nobody seemed concerned at all that this information had been used as a defense against what Todd and Amy had done to Qadira. So we ended up, the only option we were offered was transferring Qadira to the school side of Hayhurst. They had two sides. Odyssey was housed in one part of the building, and the regular school program was housed in the other part of the building. And so that's where Qadira ended up going for 4th and 5th grade. Again, we weren't offered any other options. After we lost the trial, people around us were very meaner than before we lost the trial. So it was very, very tense. We had Qadira attend counseling at LifeWorks all through her 4th grade year. I don't think she got much out of that experience. Her therapist actually had her write a letter to Amy, which we elected not to send. I don't even know what was in it. But nobody ever took this seriously, what happened to her. And actually, when Todd and Amy found out that we put Qadira into counseling, they were upset. We did try to appeal the ruling, and we actually ended up hiring Andy Simran. So we ended up paying $10,000 to appeal this ruling. I had to borrow money from my family, and we did end up losing that appeal eventually. It was actually thrown out by one of the judges on the court at the time was Ellen Rosenblum. But that appeal, it was thrown out, and Amy was just awarded more money. So I ended up filing a bar complaint against Scott that pretty much got immediately thrown out. They said he went to Harvard, so I guess if you go to Harvard, you get to do whatever you want. And then I eventually filed a pro se lawsuit against him because I was just trying to figure out what happened in this case. And during that lawsuit, I actually had the opportunity to depose Scott. And so I found out some very interesting things. Number one, he worked with Todd's brother, Rex Burkholder, as a kid on a committee with the Bicycle Transportation Alliance. So he admitted that. And he admitted a lot of things in that deposition. The lawsuit went nowhere. The court just threw it out. But I was able to glean a lot of information. And one thing I know for sure is, he knew the family, and, he was obviously trying to protect the family. So if you don't know who Rex Burkholder is, he's actually running for City Council District 3. So it's very easy to Google him. Another piece of information that came out during this process as I was trying to get Qadira's injury actually investigated, and the action against Scott is that Scott actually in Qadira's trial had asked for a jury instruction on the infirm condition. He pretty much, what he was saying is that Qadira's skin tone was an infirm condition. So the conversation that he had with Judge McShane behind our backs was that, essentially if Qadira had been white, the injury wouldn't have been so bad, which is absolutely preposterous. I mean, white, black, I don't care what color you are. I mean, a burn that bad it wouldn't have been any better on a different color child, that's for sure. This was a really horrific injury, and this was just another way that he was downplaying it. But we believe that Scott is racist and that he hated Qadira, and I think that the fact that he asked for that jury instruction is proof of that. We couldn't get any legal representation after Scott threw Qadira's case, so my husband's lawsuit against Nike went nowhere. It was thrown out by Judge Donald Letourneau in the Washington County Court, and my husband filed subsequent EEOC complaints against Nike throughout the years, and those also went nowhere. The more we looked into Qadira's case, the more we tried to peacefully pursue every avenue we could to hold the people who covered up what happened to her accountable. We filed a pro se lawsuit against OHSU and Providence St. Vincent's for failing to treat Qadira, but that was just thrown out by Judge Kelly Skye. And then we also tried to file a federal complaint. So we filed a 68-page federal complaint, and that was also thrown out by Judge Michael Mossman. We were hoping by filing that complaint that we could get a federal investigation into what happened to Qadira, but the FBI adamantly refused to investigate, and that has continued on to this day. We still cannot get any legal representation for Qadira or for ourselves when it comes to anything that happened to us. So we still, it's been hard to get any answers as to what happened to Qadira or even what happened to my husband's job. Qadira's health just continued to deteriorate after she was burned. In 2011, she was rushed to Emmanuel Hospital in full-blown ketoacidosis, and she almost died. She was in the ICU, and then she ended up being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And then a little bit later that year, she suffered a massive fracture when our dog ran into her leg at the dog park, and she ended up needing this really extensive surgery, and that's when we found out that she had osteopenia. So the health problems continue on to this day, and right now she has suffered the dislocation of both of her knees. So she's had surgery on one leg. She'll have to have surgery on another. She's looking at hip fracture in the next 10 years. Because again, the osteopenia is just devastating for somebody her age. And then of course that coupled with the type 1 diabetes, she just really has a really tough time. And the bone loss that she's suffering from not having been properly treated, that affects her entire body. So Qadira has never been able to obtain copies of any of her medical records. If we didn't have the medical records that we got out of Scott Files, she wouldn't have any medical records at all. So it doesn't matter how many requests she puts in. We've requested her medical records before. She just can't get them. The next few years in our family was just difficult. It still continues to be difficult. We never stop searching for answers. I started posting a lot on Facebook, trying to, engage people, trying to figure out how to get people, interested in what had happened to us. So maybe we could get an investigation, and just never really got much support. I don't know if it's the way I was trying to engage with people, or just the fact that we had lost the initial trial, or what it was. But over the next few years, I just started pretty much losing a lot of friends and family, and I talk about that a lot in my book. Qadira had a really difficult time, and her entire school career, really wasn't fun, because I just think that, this just followed her everywhere. Rumors about what happened with this, and same thing for all of my kids, really, and in our entire family. I was caregiving to try to help support the family, and Renee eventually became a carpenter. But we've definitely had a rough go of it. We have we have been able to keep our house and keep our family together, but I have to say it's been really, really tough. In 2018, Qadira really did want to try to get the investigation reopened. We had gone up to the hospitals, and she was trying to get her medical records. And um, over there at OHSU, they brought just this thug down to the HR, and he told Qadira that if she continued to seek answers about her treatment after she was burned, that they were going to arrest me. So, um, and we did sit down with John Cosolino. At the time, he was the head of the multidisciplinary child abuse team. And he did meet with me and Qadira, and we told him everything that happened, him and a officer, Stephanie Lorenko. And we never really heard from John. He said he was going to look into it. And 5 months after we had that meeting, he just sent Qadira an email and said that they could find no crime and they weren't going to help her or do anything. So we got the idea to start protesting because of BLM, actually. When BLM swept the nation, and especially here in Portland, we really thought that maybe, you know, people would be more receptive to our story, because, there seemed to be this big movement in the country to, raise awareness for, people of color. So we did try going down to a couple of the BLM protests here in Portland, but they were actually pretty scary and violent. And so we just decided we didn't want to do something like that. Me and my husband are pacifists. So we came up with the idea of doing our own little rally, that we, branded Justice for Qadira. So it started it started on December 21st, 2020. We started down at Pioneer Square. And our goal was to go once a week and just tell our story to the city. So initially, we would go every Friday about 10:30, 11 a.m. and we'd tell our story for about an hour. And then we would film the rallies, and then I would post them on the Facebook Multnomah Village page, because Multnomah Village is near our house and it's near Todd's house, so it's near the scene of the crime. So it's made up of people. It's a Facebook page made up of people that are from this area. So but I ended up getting kicked off that page. People got angry about me posting the rallies there, or rally, protest, whatever you want to call it. So after I got kicked off the Multnomah Village page, we just decided that we would go up to Multnomah Village once a week and we'd do the protest up there live. So we started going up to Multnomah Village every Wednesday at 11 a.m. And, we would run our protest up there once a week. And we got into a groove with that, and we ended up doing this protest for 2.5 years. The Portland police immediately started bothering us and harassing us, telling us to turn it down. In May of 2021, Jake Jensen called us, and we do have a recorded call with him, and he was essentially, again, telling us to turn it down. And, every now and again when we were protesting, the police would come by and essentially bother us to turn down our amp, which really wasn't very loud in the first place. I mean, obviously our protests never even made the papers. Also, as a result of starting to protest, We started flyering to basically get people to know about our protest and know about what happened to Qadira. So we made these flyers and we were, passing them out in our neighborhood. And Todd had remarried this woman named Christina, and she ended up getting a flyer. And she was not happy to hear about what happened to Qadira. Apparently, Todd had never told Christina that he had abused Qadira or anything about Qadira. She knew nothing about Qadira. And when she got that flyer, she came down to our house looking for us. She was screaming. She was pretty upset, that somebody was, spreading rumors about her family. So she actually went over to my neighbor's house, and my neighbor told her to come over here. And I wasn't home that day, but she ended up talking with Renee on our porch, and he told her the whole story. And she knew we were telling the truth, and she was really upset. She sent me a lot of disturbing messages in that time period, and she also sent me CP. It was one photo. It was a very disturbing photo of a child, a little girl, in a shower. And I know that this photo was CP because I did eventually take it to the police and the feds, and it was identified as CP. Initially, when Christina started sending me these messages, I didn't know what to think. And in fact, I kind of blacked the photo out and the messages out of my mind when I first received them. I think it was just so shocking. I mean, if you've never seen CP before, it's very disturbing. So, when she initially sent me that first message and then subsequent messages about other things that were going on in that house that were very disturbing, I didn't know what to think of any of it. She also sent me pictures of herself beaten up. So, and she just told me a lot of things about what had been going on in that house. She also told me she had tried to go to the police and that the police wouldn't help her. I didn't know what to do with this information, but after I got locked out of my Nextdoor account, I eventually got back into the account and I opened up the messages with Christina, and the photo popped back up. And it was pretty much at this point that I realized I needed to go to the police. I mean, I talked with a few friends, and that's what I was really encouraged to do. So that's what me and my husband ended up doing. And I mean, at this point, Qadira wanted to go back to the police as well because, I mean, finding out that Todd was beating Christina and the other information that she told us, along with the pictures, we were really hoping to get some kind of investigation into what was going on at the house. So we reported all of this information to the Portland Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation here. And I mean, they seemed like they were taking it seriously, but after we reported the information, there was no follow-up. When we were at the feds and I showed them the photo, I mean, the first thing that the federal agent did was lean over and say, "Yep, that's CP." So, and then when we took it to the Portland Police, same thing. In fact, an officer, David Cipriano, made me erase the photo off of my phone because, you just can't be walking around with that stuff. So, Christina disappeared after we went and reported to the police. We reported in March of 2023, I think. And shortly thereafter, we started receiving criminal noise citations at our rallies. Each time we got a citation, we would go down to the court and they would just dismiss us. In fact, we weren't even going into the courtroom. We were pretty much dismissed at the verification window. So, but on the fifth citation, I think we went to court. This was on June 22nd, 2023, and we were arraigned on 19 counts of disorderly conduct. And at that arraignment, we were told that we were facing 10 years in prison and $96,000 worth of fines. What we were told by Mike Schmidt's office is that we had broken the sound ordinance, and so that is why we have been being criminally charged. They say that our amplification, that we were too loud, essentially. Um, all very ironic because obviously, Portland has been the epicenter of some really, really, really violent protests. So, I mean, the 2020 protests here were very destructive, and we are still seeing destructive protests in the city today. So, none of that has seemed to have any kind of effect on our case. Every time we've brought it up, the DA has simply said that the other protests are irrelevant, and the only thing that matters is that we've made too much noise. When we bring up the fact that our daughter was abused, they just disregard it. So we've given the district attorney and law enforcement all of the information I've given you, in this documentary, and they just don't care. They say that they can't find a crime, and again, even though Qadira's health continues to deteriorate because she is not getting the care she needs, because there's so much conspiracy surrounding what happened to her. She just can't. It's very hard for her to get, her doctors to believe her or take her seriously. And this has been a problem her entire life, since she was burned. So nobody wants to admit that anybody did anything wrong in this case. And that is continuing on to this day. I hadn't heard from Christina ever since I went to the police with the messages and the information she gave me. And as we've been putting, things together to fight this case, my son, who's been really, he's been really helping us get a lot of this stuff figured out. He really started bothering me about where Christina was. He wanted to find her, and I really had no way of finding Christina, but we started looking for her, and we did end up finding her. It turned out that Christina was arrested on May 31st, 2023, just a few weeks after we went to the police with the information she had sent us, for allegedly attacking Todd. And she is facing 8 felonies right now. And I feel really bad for Christina. I feel like she should not be in jail. And I'm not sure about the ins and outs of her case, but what I do know is that the communications that I was having with Christina were very disturbing, and I feel like what Christina needed was help, and that's what I thought Christina was going to get when I went to the police with the information she sent me, but instead she got thrown into jail. So Todd is a very protected individual. We would also very much like to help Christina get a proper defense attorney. We think that, Christina, she has a good heart, and I think that she has been trying to help, and I think that she saw some really terrible things in that house. And I think that whatever she did, you know, I think that she may be felt like she had no other options, because that's the one thing I can say about this experience. It's been very, very frustrating because when you meet, with the people in charge over and over and over, and they tell you that they're not going to help you, it's incredibly frustrating, especially when there are children involved, and, you know, you you want to see them get helped. And from what I've seen here in law enforcement in Portland is they are not interested in helping out with this kind of thing at all. They are just more interested in looking the other way. And it's very sad and it's very worrisome. We hope to see all the people who were involved in harming Qadira and covering up what happened to Qadira held accountable. We believe that, our public institutions need to be, um, we need to hold these places to high standards. And, the services that we've gotten over the years from our trusted institutions, we've gotten no service at all. And that's no way for civilized society to treat its citizens. So we need to do better here in Portland. And it starts with making sure that um, people are held responsible for their actions. What I believe is that, the only thing that you ever can truly own in this world is your actions. And, for the people who engaged in this, horrific behavior towards our daughter and towards our family, I'm sorry that you made the decision to do that. But I mean, just as maybe you've spent a career putting people in jail for committing crimes and holding people accountable for committing crimes, well, when you commit them, I think just because you are in a position of authority, I don't think that excuses, criminal behavior. So I think that the people who did this to Qadira, and I think the people who covered it up, I think it's time to pay the piper. We are still really hoping to get a federal investigation into what happened to Qadira. Her health is still continuing to deteriorate. We really don't know what that burn did to her body. She still has never even seen a burn doctor. We think that she needs to be acknowledged as a victim and that she needs to get coordinated care, and there needs to be a very thorough investigation into what happened to her, because there are just so many public officials involved in in covering up what happened to her, that it seems like it shouldn't even be possible that something like this could happen. We have stacks of information, and none of it's been looked at by law enforcement. So hopefully, by releasing this documentary and by Qadira speaking up, because she is finally ready to start speaking up. It took her a long time to get to this place. We have really, really, really tried to, I think, shield her as best as we can, but things are starting to come to a head now. She wants to know what happened to her. And what me and her dad can do for her right now is just give her all of this information. And what the public can do for her is just, help her, actually, hold these people accountable for what they did to her. The bottom line is either the law matters or it doesn't. And we have all these laws in place to, protect people, presumably. But, what happens when the people in authority, in positions of authority, just don't bother to follow them? Who is supposed to hold them accountable? Because so far, we have not seen an avenue to do that. And if that's the case, then, something really needs to change in our society, because if the people in charge can just commit crimes at will against the citizens, then that's not even a civilization, you know? We got to do better. So I hope together we can do better, Portland. I also want to say that I do feel proud of the protests that we put on. We didn't ever garner a big following, and, we didn't have crowds, or anything like that. But we did get out there and we tried our best. I mean, we got out there, rain, snow, um, blistering hot days. I mean, we never missed a protest until we were swept off the streets. So, fighting for our daughter has been everything for us. My husband and I will never apologize for fighting for justice for Qadira. What we've encountered on this journey has been incredibly heartbreaking, disappointing, frustrating, and just shocking. Um, just shocking displays of irresponsibility from just a myriad of adults in positions of authority, teachers, doctors, lawyers, judges, um, all these people coming together to look the other way and help cover up this crime. And, honestly, I have to say it's actually been heartbreaking. We have to hold the people who are administering our society to a much higher standard if we want to see life improve for everybody on the planet, honestly. uh, I just think that what we've seen is that there's just a lack of accountability. There's a lack of integrity. Um, Everybody is just so irresponsible. That's what we've encountered here in this journey trying to fight for justice for our daughter. So, and that extends to, this DA, to Mike Schmidt, and to his administration. I mean, instead of, investigating this case and giving it the proper attention and helping Qadira, they've spent the last year prosecuting us, with taxpayer dollars, knowing full well that we are not criminals, you know what I'm saying? And that what happened to Qadira was very real and it was very wrong, and instead, of helping us, they've tried to silence us. And, still no apology to this day. So, we've been fighting this case for 11 months, pretty much, well, 10, 11 months since last June. And we filed a motion to dismiss for vindictive and selective prosecution that was thrown out by Judge Baggio. We filed a motion to compel so we could get access to our daughter's, supposed police records that they say they have, but we don't even believe they have. But and that was denied. We asked to view other complaints on other protests, especially all these violent protests that go on in Portland. And, we were told that that wasn't relevant and that we couldn't view any other complaints. I think that they wouldn't allow us to view other complaints against other protests because, if there had been any complaints, then that would have proven the vindictive and selective prosecution that, again, was thrown out by Judge Baggio. So, but anyway, our requests were denied by Judge Francisconi. And then, on May 6, 2024, the case was dismissed by Judge Lucero, actually. And this was after we filed a motion to dismiss for violations of our First Amendment. The state didn't respond, and then they just elected to dismiss the case. although the DA did threaten that if we went out to protest again, that they would possibly bring criminal charges again, or try to bring criminal charges again. I just don't know. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know what to think about that. Our suggestion to the court was that this case be referred for a federal investigation. There's just so many, trusted adults involved in covering up what happened to Qadira. We think that her case needs to be thoroughly examined by, law enforcement, and thoroughly examined by the public, because what happened here? Our daughter fell through, what was essentially a cavern in this very complicated system that should have been able to catch her. I mean, because, we're supposed to have a system of checks and balances. And, the bottom line is, we're paying all these people, presumably to administer our society so that we can live together peacefully and things can be organized, and so people don't have to engage in vigilante justice and stuff. We are supposed to be, this is supposed to be a civilization. But what I'll tell you is the last 17 years, I mean, me and my husband haven't even been treated like human beings by the people administering our society. So it's honestly, it's just left us, really speechless at times. I mean, what happened to Qadira was horrible, and she still needs justice. She has a ton of medical problems, and right now, I mean, they are still continuing to disregard that. So we're going to continue to keep fighting peacefully. And, we hope that people will join us in asking, the Portland leadership, and the state leadership here in Oregon, what happened in this case, because it's important for us to understand. It's important for every citizen, to understand how something like this could happen. So again, thank you so much for listening, and justice for Qadira.